Council. So please be advised, North Frontenac Council meetings are recorded. By attending a public meeting of council, you are consenting to your image, voice, and comments being recorded. Members of public, staff, delegates, and attendees are advised that they may be subject to legal action if their actions result in inappropriate and or unacceptable behavior or comment. We begin this gathering by acknowledging and celebrating these traditional lands as a gathering place of the first people and their ancestors who were entrusted to care for Mother Earth since time immemorial. We do so respecting both the land and the Indigenous people who continue to walk with us through this world. Today, the Township of North Frontenac is committed to working with Indigenous peoples and all residents to pursue a united path of reconciliation. The Council of the Township of North Frontenac is conducting a special meeting regarding an application to amend the township's official plan to redesignate a property from rural area to a site-specific rural cooperative area 1, and an application to amend the township zoning bylaw to rezone the subject property from limited service waterfront LSW and limited service rural LSR to a site-specific rural cooperative exception zone CO-X1. The format of the special meeting is as follows. County planning staff will provide an overview of the applications, including comments received from outside agencies and members of the public, including recommendations. Council members will ask planning staff any questions or request clarification. The applicants and our agent will have an opportunity to ask questions to provide comments at this time. At this point, members of the public will have an opportunity to ask questions or provide comments. Members of the public will remain seated and raise their hand to have an opportunity to address council. The chair will recognize each member of the public forward at each time the member will be asked to state their name. Every participant is expected to treat all others in attendance with dignity, understanding, and respect. Virtual attendees will use the raised hand function to indicate that they would like to address council, and members of the public will be brought into the meeting one at a time to address council. People will be asked to limit their comments to one address of no more than 5 minutes to ensure council can hear from others in attendance and different points can be expressed. The public forum section will be limited to approximately 90 minutes. Please be advised this meeting is to provide members of the public an opportunity to provide comments in support or in opposition of the proposed amendments. Any person who wishes to receive a copy of the minutes of the meeting, a copy of the report on the proposed amendments, or notification of the decision of the proposed amendments to the Township of North Frontenac's official plan or zoning bylaw to provide their full name, address, email address, and contact numbers to the clerk following the meeting. If they have not already done so, if you were attending the meeting in person, please add your name to the sign-in sheet. So this meeting has a lot of passion. A lot of people are invested in this. Thank you for coming. And just to make sure for the next hour and a half or 2 hours, these little instruments, I asked for turn off, including mine. First time I did this, mine was the one that rang. Not cool. So item 4 is approval of the agenda.
Moved by Councillor Hermer, seconded by Councillor Fowler. Be it resolved that council approves the agenda for the special meeting regarding an official plan amendment application and a zoning bylaw amendment application dated August 12, 2025 as circulated.
Have any comments? In favor? Carried. Have any disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Seeing none. Okay, presentation by the County of Frontenac planning staff. We have Sonia Bolton and Jenny Kapusta from the county here with us. Who's doing the presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That will be myself, Jenny Kapusta, doing the presentation today. Hi, thank you. My name is Jenny Kapusta. I'm community planner with County of Frontenac. With me is my manager, Sonia Bolton. So hopefully you can answer all of your questions and provide the details today. Here on the screen, I have a presentation that you can follow along with. I promise I won't just read all the words, but it will give you a good overview of what's going on. All right, so the subject property, as many of you are aware, is municipally known as 1099B La Folia Lane. This property is located at the edge of the hamlet of Ampa, along the shoreline of Palmerston Lake. Palmerston Lake is provincially designated as a lake trout lake, though not at capacity, so it does have ability for additional development on the property. The map up on the screen does kind of give you an idea where it is. Again, it's the edge of the hamlet of Ampa with Palmerston Lake there, and you can see the other properties on the north side. This peninsula is locally known as Gravel Point. And again, as I noted, it's municipally addressed as 1099B La Folia Lane. Previously, this was two separate lots known as 1099A and 1099B, which have now merged on title. That's something that was done potentially outside of planning. It was a land registry thing. This does happen sometimes with larger properties. The total property area is 14.4 hectares, 35.5 acres approximately. There's some confusion with regards to the total lot area being about 3 hectares. This likely comes from the original EIS description because these properties were separate, that it was described as property A and property B and had the information for both the sizes of the properties, but planning staff do want to assure everyone that the entire property as shown on the map, the 14.5 hectares, is the property that was the subject of all of the studies for this project. So currently on the subject property, there is a cottage, a wash house, which has a bathroom and laundry room. I would like to note I wrote boathouse in the report. That was incorrect. I apologize for that. It was a wash house instead. Also a septic system, sleep cabin, dock, storage shed, and garage workshop. Garage workshop on the property currently it has been constructed since this application began as an accessory to the existing residential use. That workshop was listed as part of the proposal for this project. However, as there is an existing residential use, they are able to construct a garage on the property. It is still shown on the site plans for this proposal, just to make sure that everyone's aware of exactly what's there and what's being going on. The new development that's proposed at the completion of the project would be a final number of 7 new cottages, each with their own septic system, a community building, like a 3-season sort of gathering place, not intended as a second dwelling or anything, but more a place that everyone on the property could get together and hang out in. 2 additional sleep cabins, an RV or trailer site, 3 new communal docks, 2 marine storage sheds, and 3 gazebos to be located. So that is the total build out. The intent of this is over a number of years. This isn't a project that's going to be done in the next 2 years and have all of these things built. At least that's the intent of this. Since the initial proposal was submitted, there have been a couple of provisions I'd like to note. First is rather than the standard 30-meter water body setback that is throughout all lakes and water bodies in the township, there's an increased 33-meter setback at the western end of the peninsula. So that's the end closest to the identified fish spawning habitat. This was determined through the slope stability report in consultation with MDCA and MCP on this to ensure that that setback protects the slope, the stability, and further limits any potential impacts or runoff, things like that, down towards the fish habitat when you reach that setback at the peninsula. The topography is such that the water flow is then directed into the inside of the peninsula and through rather than out towards the edge. There's some rocky outcroppings and just the way that the topography is on the property, that adds that added level of protection for, as I said, for runoff. Additionally, there was originally a boathouse proposed for the project. That would to be located at the dock on the southern side of the peninsula, and consultation with the FO and well as comments from the public, it was determined that the primary use for that boathouse was not so much to store the boats as to store stuff associated with boats. And therefore, rather than having a boathouse, the applicants have opted to replace that with 2 marine storage sheds that will be at 13 square meters in area maximum in compliance with the zoning bylaw. And that allows them to store things like jackets and paddles, all the stuff that you have with boats that you don't want to have to go up and down a big steep hill a number of times when you forget that thing. So one of these will be located on the south side of the peninsula where they have a boat parking dock. And one will be located on the north side of the peninsula at the main waterfront access area. And that way they have storage for things that, given the topography of the lot, is fairly steep. So I would like to point out something related to that has come up that may have caused confusion. This is a little harder to see on the big screen. I was just trying to illustrate. So when the proposal was submitted, there's a site plan submitted with numbers showing number 1 is a cottage, number 2 is this, number 3 is this, throughout there. And that's the image at the top right hand of the screen. So you can see like number 7 and 8 at the end, those are cottages. So the boat parking dock is not meant to have 22 boat slips. It is number 22 on the site plan. I can see how perhaps the way it was written, it would be perhaps some confusion. But as you can see here, you've got the small swim dock with a total dock area. It's an 8x12 dock. The main waterfront dock is about 224 square feet, and the boat parking dock has an area of just under 200 square feet. So you'd have to have some really small boats to get 22 on that kind of a size of a dock, but it was something that was raised because the way it was written was, 22 boat docks. I assure you it is not a boat dock for 22. It's just the number on the property. And I just wanted to let everyone know that that's the way that was. It was more identifying numbers 20, 21, and 22 were just merely the location of the docks on the property. So in support of the proposal, the applicants have undertaken a wide range of studies. The list is up on the screen and can be found in detail in the report. Kind of go through, we've got an archaeological assessment, including clearance letter from the province. We've got sanitary servicing, which is the septic and water review on the property, environmental impact statement, planning justification, slope stability, stormwater, dock plans, consulted with Department of Fisheries, Oceans, things like that. So that's the full list. The environmental impact statement has undergone 3 revisions and 3 formal versions have been submitted. Slope stability underwent a revision after consultation with Mississippi Valley Conservation, who are the review authority for natural hazards on the property. And as I noted, the site plans have undergone revision to show the removal of the boathouse and add that 33-meter setback at the end of the property. So just before we get into more details, so a slight overview of the applications and process that we're going through here today and prior to any more residential development on the property. So it's a 3-step process. You have the official plan amendment, the zoning bylaw amendment, and site plan control. The official plan is the document that sets out the guidance and the general intent and purpose of development through the township. Currently, the official plan requires a specific designation for rural co-ops. There's only one already designated in the township, and that's the Loch Lothian Co-op, located off River Road. So in order to develop this as a co-op in any form, the official plan amendment is required. As I said, there's no vacant or undeveloped lands that are pre-designated, so it's not like they could have purchased a property this is where we have planned for co-ops. This is something that is done on a case-by-case basis at the request of the property owners who want to pursue this type of development. I would like to note that should Township Council adopt the official plan amendment, the County of Frontenac is the approval authority. So that official plan amendment must then be presented to County Council for a final decision. Should that be approved, everything gets approved retroactively to the date of the Township Council approval. So we start at the top and the official plan amendment. Then we move down to zoning bylaw amendment. So zoning bylaw must have conformity with the official plan, and it's essentially the legal laws that enact the intent of the official plan. So in this case, the zoning bylaw amendment does change the zoning on specific properties and sets out things like permitted uses, what you can and can't do, how high the building is, can you have a reduced setback to lot lines or water bodies. Really the specifics on the property, like Can you have a boathouse? Can you have a sleep cabin? Can you do this? Those details, are outlined in the zoning. And as I noted, zoning must conform to the official plan designation. So in order to have the zoning for rural co-op, we do also have to have the official plan designation for that rural co-op. Another thing that we're looking at adding is a holding symbol. So just to discuss that, a holding symbol can be added to zoning where there's outstanding items that need to be completely addressed like before the development. So sometimes it's a completion of our environmental assessment. Sometimes it's a D series for, say, water and sewage on properties where there's water concerns, things like that. In this case, the holding symbol is related to the upgrades required for access along the Folia Lane where between Lake Road and where it enters the subject property. The final step in this process, as it is a waterfront development, township has what's called site plan control. And site plan is a tool that allows the township to enter into agreement with the property owner. This gets registered on title and is a legal agreement that details more specifically. So the zoning bylaw says what you're allowed to do and any limited setbacks. The site plan control really gets down into that nitty-gritty of exactly where you put the things. You know, where are we putting gazebo? Where are we putting the houses? How are we doing this? And has the ability to really get into that specifics, like where's the road access in the building? Are we doing some tree line or tree cover stuff? Is there retention of shoreline vegetation? All that kind of stuff that mitigation measures that suggested through consultation with the various agencies. These are all things that can be implemented and put into a site plan agreement. Any development approved as part of site plan must comply with the zoning standards of the property. So this is where we go through the official plan for the zoning that has added permitted uses, and then site plan implements that. And that allows the property owners to, once they've gone through the whole process, the entire project has been reviewed, and if it gets approved, they enter into this agreement. So then they can just come back, get building permits as they go through the phases of the project without having to go through a planning review each and every time. It allows the township to have confidence in what's going to happen, as well as the property owners' confidence in what they're able to develop on the property without always asking. One thing I do want to note is the provincial rules have changed and site plan control approval is required to be done by staff and is no longer a council decision. I know it's something that has come up. This is not something that the township or council has any control over. This is a provincial directive to help speed up the process for new residential development as part of the Ford Build Homes Faster and the various different acts. So this is something they've done that once the zoning's in place, the final approval is done through staff level. It doesn't mean that we ignore rules. It doesn't mean that anything is skipped over. The process is still the same. Everything's still reviewed and circulated, but it is something that wouldn't be a council decision. I just wanted to make a note of that. So as I noted, variety of technical reports and studies and documents have been submitted. So here on this page, you can see the list of agencies that have been consulted with regards to this. That's from the Conservation Authority, the Ministry of Environment, Fisheries and Oceans, so even the Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism. So that's the archaeological clearance. So stage 1 and 2 archaeological assessment was done for the property and submitted for review, and a clearance letter was provided by the province that says they are satisfied there's no further excavations or studies needed. However, I mean, you never know what you find when you're building, so site plan will have notes in there that if there's any archaeological items uncovered or other such things that they do need to pause work and follow the appropriate process for those should they be discovered. Again, we've also consulted with like the Township Public Works Department, Fire, Building, County Product Paramedics, and had technical reviews done by Aegis Group, formerly Macintosh Perry, and they're the township peer review that environmental assessment. Much back and forth has been done. At this point, all the agencies that are listed here are satisfied with the proposals and have no further objections to the official plan amendment or zoning bylaw amendment. And as I noted, they will be recirculated during the site plan process to ensure that suggested mitigation measures are included and followed as part of that site plan approval process. All of those will be detailed in the site plan control agreement, and that way there is hopefully some measure of confidence that the township will be able to enforce all of the required mitigation measures, at least on the public side. I'm confident in that. So there was quite a public interest in this, which is excellent. I love to see people involved in the planning process. Here on the screen, this is just a list of public comments by theme, and I'm not going to necessarily read all of them, and we will address them as part of the planning analysis, including like natural heritage features, especially like wildlife habits, species at risk, fish habitat, especially considering the lake trout lake status of the property, or I mean of the lake and proximity of the property. Again, some confusion of the size, which I kind of alluded to before, proposed uses, character. What about the septic systems? Have we looked at natural hazards? You know, how are we going to oversight this? All of these things that there's a number of different planning processes and tools that can be used to achieve this. So I'm just going to go through the planning analysis. Again, you have questions or further details. These are much more detailedly addressed in the report, but I'm going to hit sort of the highlights of the different themes, the planning analysis, and public comments through this. So the first is natural heritage. As knows, this is a waterfront property. So it's a lake trout lake, but not at capacity. As I noted, that is something that, given certain considerations, is supportable for additional development, including new lot creation, things like that. Also on the property, there's some unevaluated wetlands on the interior and the fish habitat that's present on or near the property. We've got an increased water body setback, 33 meters at the western end of the peninsula, and that's in proximity to the spawning beds that are located at the end of the gravel point. The only reductions to the water body setback is for water access points, so that's stairs or paths down to the water, and that's also for the permission for the marine storage sheds. Now, generally, you'd have a 15-meter setback for those. However, the slope on the property, 6 meters is about as far as you can get before it becomes almost too steep. You'd have to stick a shed to the side, which is not terribly practical and not great for the slope. So they've done what they can to do that, but that will be at 6 meters. And the gazebos will be at 3 meters, and that is permitted with the zoning. So following on from natural heritage kind of leads into species at risk. So one of the things that is a big concern and was addressed in the environmental assessment is species at risk. So there are provincial rules regarding if you discover any species at risk or habitat on your property while you're doing things. But this property was reviewed to determine if there's any specific or noted items of concern or areas of concern or specific species identified. As I noted, an EIS was prepared in support of these and peer reviewed by Aegis, and much back and forth to address some concerns and questions over the process, whether the proper reviews have been done. The applicant's consultant did do some additional field studies and different site visits to ensure that they had fully assessed the property for these species. As I noted, questions raised by both the Aegis peer review, public questions, and the public review of the EIS wanted to ensure that we had done a proper, complete review for species at risk. It's determined that while there was no specific species observed on the property, there is potential habitat areas identified for certain species. Consultation with MECPs, that's Ministry of the Environment, are satisfied that there's no negative impacts on the species or their habitat as a result of this proposal, and no further authorization from MECP is required prior to development. Mitigation measures suggested through the EIS and to be implemented through site plan, including timing of site clearing construction to ensure minimum impact potential. So there's breeding times for different birds and turtles and fish. And so it was determined that the maximum timeline from the earliest to the latest, and within that timeline, there is to be limited site clearing if it needs to be done in order to, say, put footings in before freezing or things like that. the way that's done and certain mitigation measures, those will be again through site plan just to ensure that that's done properly. But again, through MECP review, they're satisfied that the way it's proposed and the mitigation measures proposed, including timings, are satisfactory to protect any potential species or their habitat on the property. Proximity to that fish spawning habitat, absolutely a concern, and lake capacity potential for development is something that was discussed. So, Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks is the ministry responsible for water testing of all lake trout lakes in Ontario. So they do this not on an annual basis, given the number of lakes, but they do it on a circulating basis. Palmerston Lake was last tested in May 23 for general water quality and phosphorus levels, and again in September 2023, at which point they looked at water quality, dissolved oxygen, and temperature. And they do this on different times related to different things that show up at different times. I would love more details, but I'm not an environmentalist, so that's sort of, again, my synopsis of what they do. The ministry has no concerns with the sampling results, and wanted to note that correspondence with them said that lake capacity is determined on averages. So one sampling event, one anomalous high or low, is unlikely enough. It's unlikely to cause significant enough change to that average relative to lake capacity status. However, it is something that they look at again, through their long-term average, and they look at different development and how those potentially impact it. With regards to that, DFO comments and again, other public input, the boathouse was removed following consultation to try and help reduce the amount of boat traffic that means in the proximity of the southern side of the peninsula. Again, anyone on the lake can still boat around there. There's no one currently stopping anybody boating in this area other than concern for the fish and knowledge of that area. Again, following that consultation and with the FO that and the slope stability, there's that increased 33-meter water body setback located at the end of the peninsula for that slope stability, vegetation, and reduction in habitat or potential impacts on the fish habitat. Next things we looked at included property size and density of development. So as I noted before, one of the common themes, and I do feel that came from the initial EIS, was that there was concern over the actual subject size of the property and the density proposed related to the size of the property. A lot of comments and questions included, how are we doing this on a 3-acre or 3-hectare property? But in fact, the total property area is 14.5 hectares. And that is the size of the property study. Again, it came down to a 1 lot, 2 lot, now it's merged, and trying to appropriately describe the environment as it was and versus as it is. So they have merged into a single property, and 8 dwellings over the total lot area of 14 hectares equals an average of 1.8 hectares or 4.4 acres on average across the whole property, which is more than double what would be required for a new lot creation on a waterfront property. Do you acknowledge dwellings are not going to be evenly spread throughout the whole property in little 4-acre islands? Rather, they're going to be in a couple of clusters at the end of the peninsula, a little bit further down, and then in the original cottage at the very eastern end. Clustering allows less impact overall. So you don't have a lot of individual cleared areas. You have one area that's cleared and then linkages between them. This is something that is favorable from an environmental perspective, that if you're going to have some clearing, you do it in grouped areas rather than having a single waterfront access for each cottage and having them each have their own boat dock and their each thing. So then we've got a total of 8 dwellings with 4 shared water accesses, rather than if they were all on their own lots, they'd have their own water access points. And doing that limits the potential for impact on certain species. You can avoid some areas of the property, have a majority of the retention of tree coverage. So based on the EIS, the approximate cleared area for each dwelling, including septic system and stuff, is 0.1 of a hectare. So on the peninsula, that would be about just half a hectare that is planned to be cleared in association with the dwellings. There will be some additional limited clearing for the road access and some of the community buildings. But this is all intended to be in the center of the peninsula. There's definitely some concern over the commercial uses in the rural co-op zone, especially as both the official plan designation and zoning do permit commercial and industrial uses in that rural co-op area. The intention with that was that a co-op could be a self-sufficient, self-sustaining, and have some income source for residents who chose to participate in that co-op. Given the location of this property along the shoreline, and proximity to the waterfront area and the waterfront policies limiting uses on the shoreline to residential, both the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw will limit the permitted uses to residential and accessory to residential uses only, and in conformity to those usually allowed in the waterfront areas. So the commercial and industrial type uses that it would normally be permitted in a rural co-op will not be permitted in this zone or in this official plan designation. There's no intentions for this to be used as a commercial resort. And as I noted, will not be permitted under the site-specific zoning. However, planning can only review on what is submitted and not what may be desired or what may happen in the future. At this point, it's a family co-op. And that is what we are reviewing here. So one of the big issues, again, also lots of big issues with this one, access by private lane. Anytime you have increased development down a private lane, access can be a challenge. While the township does have private lane standards in the official plan that come from the Frontenac County Private Lane Study, there's a lot of existing lanes like Lafolia Lane that are not in conformity with that. They're not at the same surveyed width. The grades on them are not the same. The width is not the same. This is very common. A lot of these were smaller cottage properties, and lanes over time have changed. Cars over time have changed. So one of the requirements when we do development down private lanes is to ensure at minimum there's an standard access for emergency services. So in this case, planning consulted with Township Public Works staff, the fire department, and Frontenac County paramedics. So they are the people that would be providing that response and the engineer to review these types of things. Based on their review, the lane in its existing condition would be insufficient for emergency services access. While if there was an emergency, the first responders would make every effort to get down there. Should any of the property owners down the lane require, say, like a letter for their insurance ensuring or guaranteeing that they have fire access. This is something the township would not be able to provide for this lane. So currently it has some access challenges. So adding more development without addressing these would not be good planning and not in the best interest of the property owners or the township. So as a result of that review, there's a technical memo provided that breaks the lane down into a number of different sections. That review and map associated was attached as part of the agenda to this, if you'd like further details. And that just sort of outlines where maybe some additional clearing could be, if you could level it out, different things. Again, those are more of a technical side. There was some questions with regards to whether this constitutes an overburden. So the property owners over which the lane passes to get to subject property provided a legal opinion on the assessment. Property owners provided a legal opinion on the assessment. And the township had their own solicitor review the easement documents with regards to this access, as well as the legal opinions provided by both the property subject property owners and the neighbors. Based on that, there is nothing from a legal perspective from planning that expressly limits additional development on the lane. There's no encumbrances. So it's really the upgrades and the challenges to getting that upgrade and working with the neighbors is something that is outside the scope of planning staff's ability to do things. We can require upgrades and have agreements on the subject property, but not property that is owned by other people. Unfortunately, if there's challenges with getting this done, at the advice of the township solicitor, this is a private civil matter between the neighbors and not something we can enforce. And this is why we are recommending the inclusion of the holding symbol until such time those upgrades can be completed. As provided that access is sufficient, then it would be, in the opinion of planning staff, good planning with appropriate access. In its current situation, it's not appropriate, and that is why that's being applied to the holding symbol. The holding symbol is being applied, sorry. We also looked at like rural and waterfront characters, which is one of the tenets of the official plan, maintaining that character. We're not looking at having great big resorts on waterfront properties. So I often say to people, we're trying to stop being the Muskokas before we get to that point. We want the development, but we don't want it to look like there's people everywhere. Maintain that rural character. So as I noted, the 8 dwellings over the total property is approximately 4 acres per dwelling. Again, I recognize they're not evenly spaced, but on an average density, this is well in keeping with other development along the shoreline of Palmerston Lake. There's many significantly smaller lots, third of an acre or so, all along the shoreline that contain existing residential development and have sufficient space for dwelling, septic system, parking area, and such. Some of them even meet a 30-meter setback, some of them don't. So the density and character of this is definitely in keeping with existing development. In fact, it's a lot less dense than a lot of the existing development. The setbacks and the peninsula also help with screening it. So you've got no vegetation removal permitted anywhere along that 30-meter buffer, except again, as I noted, where you've got the water access points. It's well treed. That will help screen it from the lake. So from a sort of character of the waterfront, likely you won't see the cottages any more than you see any of the other existing cottages or docks on the shoreline of the property. You get glimpses of them, obviously, in the middle of the winter. If you're doing ice fishing, you're going to see more, but no different than any other cottage development along the lake. There's a site servicing done. The intention is that the water servicing for all of the new dwellings will be drawn from the lake. There's no drilled wells being planned for this property, which is an option and very common for cottages throughout the township. Each new dwelling will have its own associated septic system, and the site servicing brief looked at the total proposed daily design flow capacity. So when you get to 10,000 liters per day, you get into the Ministry of the Environment approval. The total design capacity at this point for the project is under that, and therefore would be a township approval. However, I'd like to note that as each building comes in and is proposed for construction, the building department will review the permit at that time and ensure that the septic capacity is suitable. Should that threshold be reached or exceeded at any point as the development is built out, then that responsibility would be transferred to the Ministry of the Environment. And again, this is something that will be included as a condition in the site plan. But it's not, as I said, not an instant, it's a multi-phase. So every time we put a new dwelling in, we'll look and reassess and make sure that the site servicing is suitable and the capacity is done. One of the additional ways to help with site servicing and septic impact is recommendation for perhaps some of the tertiary treatment systems, alternative sewage systems, maybe some sort of communal systems. Counties working on a great communal servicing project. Anyway, that's an aside, just will take for us to help with that. But it's something that will be addressed as it is developed out. So slope stability and natural hazard is definitely a concern for the property. There's high steep slopes along the shoreline of the peninsula. It does level off and get flatter towards the eastern end where you have the inland and sort of like unevaluated wetlands. So you've got slope stability over the slopes. And you've got flooding and erosion potential from Palmerston Lake and the wetland areas and the rest of the property. So the slope stability assessment was completed and reviewed by Mississippi Valley Conservation. As you know, conservation authorities are designated or delegated for natural hazards under provincial direction. And in consultation with the Conservation Authority and Aegis and UPIS, sort of, again, we did a lot of back and forth on this, determined that the 33-meter setback at the western end with 30 meters over the rest would be suitable to ensure slope stability. Again, added mitigation measures included limiting any vegetation removal to help stabilize that slope and leaving what's there as much as possible while permitting development of a property. As I noticed, the proposed boathouse has been replaced with 2 marine storage sheds, although only at 6 meters compared to 15 again, and that's with regards to stability and consultation that further increase would not be in the best interest of construction methods on that type of a slope. With regards to cultural heritage, as I said, stage 1 and 2 archaeological assessment has been completed for the property. Any larger development, any comprehensive thing like this, we always look at that. Was reviewed by the province, and again, clearance letter provided confirming no specific site studies are needed. As I noted too, if you're digging and you find something, you have to stop and follow the rules. So that's in there. But at this point, there was nothing that indicated any significant source of concern from an archaeological standpoint. This is not terribly surprising, as this property was historically used as a gravel pit. So likely anything of that type has long been excavated and removed as part of the pit operations historically. These applications were also circulated to Algonquins of Ontario for review and comment on this. As of this meeting, they have chosen to not provide any comment or highlight any concerns with regards to this development, but they were consulted through the process. And so, as I said, any applications for official plan and zoning bylaw are required to be consistent with the provincial planning statement, conform to both county and Frontenac official plan, township of North Frontenac official plan. So it's a top down. You start at the provincial's level, you go to the county level, you go to the township level, and each one of those is required to conform with the one above it, and then you get more finite down to the implementation of those policies at the township level. So the waterfront area designation and the township generally applies to all lands within 150 meters, 500 feet of water bodies. Well, this property doesn't specifically have that designation on it, likely due to its proximity and sort of half in and half out of the hamlet of Wampa. A lot of times the hamlet designations are in place rather than a waterfront area. The policies of the waterfront area were considered and applied to this development and throughout the review process. Again, the reason we're doing an official plan amendment rather than just a zoning bylaw amendment is that rural cooperative is an independent designation and there's no existing undeveloped or lands that are pre-designated for that. So that is why that has to be done rather than just doing a waterfront policy. And again, the official plan amendment will limit the co-op uses to residential and accessory to residential in reflection to it being a waterfront property, and that's more in conformity with the waterfront area policies. We reviewed against all applicable policies I noted, addressed a sort of high-level summary in the presentation here, and there's a detailed policy table attachment to the planning report if you are a policy person like we planners are and want to get really into the nitty-gritty. There's many pages of fun information for your reading pleasure. As a result of consultation with all agencies and review of policies, planning staff are of the opinion that the proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendments are consistent with the provincial planning statement and meet the intent of both the county and township of those Frontenac official plans. And as I noted, any remaining issues, mitigation measures, outstanding concerns with regards to site specifics are going to be addressed through the site plan control process. So almost done, I promise. The proposed official plan amendment, so just a few details on the specifics for those. Originally, it was done as a map change, really just from rural and waterfront limited service to a rural co-op. Again, consultation with public and looking into the waterfront policies, it was determined this will now be a site-specific rural cooperative area number 1 that limits the uses to residential and accessory to residential uses only, and specifies that all policies of the waterfront area also will apply to this property and development. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment is site-specific zoning, again, limiting permitted uses to residential and accessory. No commercial or industrial uses permitted that would otherwise be permitted in a rural co-op zone. So permitted structures and uses on the property will include a maximum of 8 dwellings, 4 docks, 4 waterfront activity areas, and cleared access pathways, 3 sleep cabins, 3 gazebos, 2 marine storage sheds, 2 viewing platforms, plus accessory structures and uses. So that's where you've got a workshop, a garage, community building. Those aren't specifically listed, but they are also permitted as accessory to residential uses in conformity with the accessory policies of the zoning bylaw. This zoning amendment also will specify and include mapping to ensure the 33-meter water body setback at the western end near the fish spawning area. And as I noted, a holding symbol will be applied as part of that zoning with regards to the challenges of access and upgrades to the lane access to the property. And until that can be completed, no new residential dwelling development will be permitted on the property. Thank you. Hope that I've answered all your questions, though I'm sure there'll be many to come. Over to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Jenny. How's the voice holding out in your throat?
Doing good. I got a coffee. I was sick last week, so you're a little concerned, but I have all of the liquids and the throat lozenges because I assume there'll be much more talk going on.
Thank you. Okay, council members, do you have any comments, questions you'd like to ask? Deputy Mayor.
Frankly, I was very surprised when I talked to Joe about 2 weeks ago and learned that this was approved, and then I read the planning report a number of times, looking for flaws and errors. So we have government agencies that are saying there will be no effect on the spawning bed. I mean, I could disagree with that, but I'm not an authority, so I have to accept what MBCA says, what the Department of Fisheries and Oceans says, what the Ministry of Environment says. But frankly, the Ministry of Natural Resources passed the buck. They didn't say anything. That's really disappointing. But where I can criticize this report is on the issue of density. Waterfront development requires 0.8 hectares per lot. The density on this point is much higher than that. You've got 5 dwellings on 3.13 hectares. You would only, if you divided that area into 0.8 acre lots, you'd only be allowed 3 dwellings. So I'm going to have to vote against this simply on that basis. There are other bases. I would mention that I feel personally responsible for allowing this cooperative development to happen on waterfront. That was never intended. Back in 2017, I was involved in the definition process of this zone, and we missed this. I talked to Joe Gallivan. He says he also missed it. That will be changed if I have anything to do with it as quickly as possible.
You running for election, yeah? That never,
No,
don't
no,
ask the question.
I'll be talking to the mayor.
Thank you. Others? Counselor Good? Just wait before you start, just so you don't have to indicate how we want to vote, because it's not to hear from the applicant and from the audience, the other interested people. So
Okay, just one question. So each one of these ones, cottages or houses, whatever you want to call them, is gonna have a line running to the lake for their well access, water access down that slope. The water, so there'll be 8 different trenches down there, 4 feet deep within the water.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's still yet to be determined. So they want to build one additional cottage soon, which I'm assuming they would tap into the water with, but as part of the site plan control agreement process, we're going to need them to qualify that. Because if you're going to have multiple water systems on one lot or multiple dwellings on one line, that can change the approval process. And it may be more efficient for them to go through communal servicing. So ultimately, we want to see something done that has the least amount of impact to the environment. And I'm sure the applicant wants to see something done that's the most efficient for them from the servicing perspective. But we're going to need more details on the water servicing for the site plan control in order to be able to figure out what approval they need from which agency, whether it's a township, whether it's the province.
And the second question is the septic systems. Has there been any thought put into that new process we just had here 2 weeks ago? Telling us what all this new communal septic.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the applicants are aware of that. We have provided them with information on communal servicing, and that is an option for them that would limit the number of septic systems overall on the property. It's certainly an option for them to go that route, but they also have enough area, and there are rules within the Ontario Building Code that do also allow them to use the traditional Class 4 septic system. So we can't prohibit them from using traditional septic system. But the option for communal is there if they wish to use it. And we can put that type of wording for that flexibility in the agreement. They may start out and build, say, one more cottage with one more Class 4 system and then decide to do the rest. We can certainly work that into the site plan control agreement.
Anyone else? Councilor Fowler.
Yeah, I was taking a quick look at the official plan and section 2.3 and does speak both our responsibilities looking after the waterfront. And I've seen this place. I'm looking at the map. There's a heavy concentration of the 5 cottages at the western one of this. Also, I received information that causes me to believe that Gravel Point is a natural phenomena. To me, it should be rezoned or repurposed as a ANSI, area of significant nature. Yeah. Anyway, we end up using acronyms so much. We get on to do what the regular thing. But I'm looking at the map right here, and I think if I could cut that map in half and move those homes to the east, it might be doable. But I haven't made up my mind yet either, because in this room, I recognize most of the people are from, I know how they're going to vote. I know their opinions, and I've heard it. I'd also like to hear more from the applicant side. We did get some correspondence from them, but I really would like to have more information before I make up my mind.
Any other questions? Okay, so I have a question. First off, and comments. The 33 feet setback was in the original Gemtech report. It wasn't something that was pulled out of the air down the road several months from now. I know when the first design came back to us, it was at 30 feet. Or sorry, 30 feet? Sorry, I knew that was wrong. 30 meters, but it's actually 33. North Frontenac lives and dies by the tourist industry. And all these organizations that say, well, fishery are not in danger and this and that and so on. Based on what the applicant has said, this development is going to be used for, is going to be a concentration of people and boats and use in that particular area. And, you know, none of these organizations are going to come up with the fishery in this lake. People come to this lake and fish, they can swim, they come in summer, or the winter and the snowmobile and everything else. I'm not sure at this point we're going to want to take that chance or not. Also, it sets a precedent. So if we're going to do this, smart developer will look at this and say, let's take my property. I've got 40 acres right out in the open. There's not a tree on it. It's a perfect area for development in Mississippi. It's happening. Why can't we do that? And we'd be hard pressed to say no. I'm really concerned, as Deputy Mayor pointed out, about the property density. Yes, it's 34 or 35 acres, but the reality is it's mostly in just one little area. If anyone here wanted to build a new house or wanted to buy a property and build a house, septic system, we would require them to have 2 acres. I don't think that I really respect the applicant, what they've done, their foresight, the money they spent and the effort they put into this. I just don't think we're treating everyone equally here. And I know the idea of the co-op, but it's not creating any housing for us. The economic development will be minimal, if any. So, and then finally, Jenny, to you, the Algonquins, you said that they have chosen not to comment. Did we know that? They just not get back to us.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it's just that we've not received no response from them, throughout the process. So when I received no response, I was assuming they've chosen not to comment on it.
Did we follow up at all or?
Yes, the, staff did follow up, more than once.
Okay, so I'm sort of done here. Councilor Herman?
Well, I'd just like to make a comment. I think when it comes council's time to make a decision, we have to reflect on what our vision statement clearly states. And that is to preserve and protect the environment. I was on council as well as a couple other members here of the council that drew this up and adopted it. It was a vision of developed for the purpose and an intent. The purpose was to provide the public with a commitment that we would honor and respect our environment. The intent is that council would adhere to that commitment. And until that vision statement is changed, I think even this council and any previous or next council is committed to honor that commitment.
Councilor, so is there any final comments or questions for everybody? Deputy Mayor?
Could I ask a bit about process here? My understanding is that it's the council's official plan requires a development plan to be registered with county planners. Well, I have the official plan in front of me. It says that prior to any new development taking place in the rural cooperative area, development plan. With that development plan, which defines the number and location of the house, like where did that come from?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So there's the development plan that you're probably referring to is the site plans. There's site plan control. That's the last process.
No, this is different. This is not the site plan control.
And is development plan mentioned in the staff report or is it mentioned in one of the technical study?
It's
okay.
mentioned in
The policies of the official plan?
Describing the rural cooperative.
Right, so I think development plan is often, it's similar to site plan control, only it's actually a less rigorous process. So we're doing site plan control instead. And it's the same thing. The development plan is usually just a sketch of the site, which is then registered on title. Site plan control is a formal process under the Planning Act that also can include the technical studies and everything. So I think it's kind of semantics at this point. I think if I were to amend the official plan, I would just say site plan control applies to all cooperatives. But a development plan is essentially just the drawings that go along with the site plan control process.
So my question remains, where did the location and number of houses come from? Is that a proposal by the proponent that?
For you, Mr.
simply
Mayor, that was the applicant's proposal, yes.
And so site plan control, if this is passed, will simply confirm that and council has, what is council voting on? That's, I'm confused.
So today, through you, Mr. Mayor, so today what council votes on is the official plan amendment. And not today, I understand you're just receiving everything today, but the council votes on the amendment to the official plan and the amendment to the zoning. If those are approved, Then the applicant can carry on with the site plan control process, which is making any refinements to the drawings and the study and coming up with a formal agreement. And then that package gets signed by the township and the applicant and registered on title to the land. So that everybody understands sort of this is the playing field going forward. This is what has to be done when you come in and apply for the building permits that you need for the various buildings. So council first has to look at the official plan amendment and the zoning, because that sets the list of permitted uses. It sets all of the zoning standards that we need to use during the review of the site plan control application.
Thank you.
Councilor Fowler. It's just, looking at this map again, and there is a scale here, so I'm measuring, doing sort of a designated measuring, and the gravel point is about 150, not even 150 meters across. At the one area, it's very, very narrow. My thing is, concern is we've got septic beds there, things that might be leaching, being able to leach into the lake. We need some concrete guarantees here before anything like this could happen. I don't really see it yet. I'm just looking at it, the practical side of it. I know technically the planning and everything might fall into place, but I'm really concerned about the safety of this development. That's all I got.
Yes, and that's excellent question. Where we're looking at the clustering, because that limits, there's certain areas that are more clear than others, and this way, if we have that, it's located right in the center, so it does limit the impact by having it as far from both sides as possible. All the development will mean at least the 30-meter setback. And then by doing that, the drainage, as I said, with the topography, it all leads more into the middle, just the way that it has been excavated in the rocks. And that's why we have the clusters, or not why we have the clusters, why the applicants chose where they put them. Those are areas that are already more clear. And that way it has less impact, and the drainage is directed towards the center of the property to help limit the impact on any of the fish habitats or slope stability with runoff.
Okay, so my last comment. Last council meeting, we had a public meeting before. We talked about additional residential units. Nothing within 150 meters and waterfront zone, and here we are. Proposing this. I just square the circle here, or round square, I don't know how you want to call it, and I'm having difficulty doing that. I just think this is great development in the wrong place. That's what I think. And maybe North Frontenac is not the place for it at all anyway. Okay, I'm going to close this down, gentlemen. Okay. I would like to ask the applicant, who I know is here, would like to come up and make some comments, and more than welcome. Please introduce yourself after you're sitting down, and the floor is yours. The microphone, is that on? If you just the switches on the top.
I think that's
There
on.
you are.
Okay, I'm Amber Hall, and I am the other half of Craig Hall. We are business owners from Almont area in Carlton Place. We have a coffee roasting company that's been in business for 28 years. We are very familiar with the cooperative structure because of our buying practices of a company. We are part of a buying cooperative and work with cooperative farmers. And that when we saw that the county had a cooperative structure and our familiarity with it, that was the reason that we chose to use that. And also because it allowed us to do some waterfront development with less impact. So instead of having 7 additional cottages that each had their own waterfront presence, that each had their own shed, that each had their own gazebo, that each had their own bunkie, this was much less impact. And it's very important to us to develop in a really environmentally friendly, safe way, because we love this lake and this property, this county. We've been here for 30 years or so between Craig's parents' properties on this lake and also in up closer to Plevna. And so for us, the maintenance of the fish habitat, of the environment is really important. So we chose this structure with the idea that you could develop in a more responsible way. So instead of having that clearing at every site, for 8 structures, you have clearing at 3 sites. You have only 2 bunkies instead of 8 bunkies. So for us, we were choosing this to be more responsible, more friendly to the environment. And so also, like, when you look at the lake, the development, it was mentioned by Jenny that you're not going to see those cottages. We're not talking about clear cutting. We've chosen sites that have clearing already or little clearing needed. There won't be that waterfront presence, that clearing at each site. And we just really think that we've attempted to do something very responsible with the idea of the density. That 3.3 hectares really represents like the tip of the peninsula, like the 1/2 of what's there. So there would be 5 cottages in that area, not 7. So that original breakage of those 2 lots, that one that was the smaller section, I think has 4, maybe 5 cottages in it. We are open to suggestions for making changes to this and have been all along. Just a couple of notes that are slightly different from what Jenny mentioned. Another mitigation measure was to move the boathouse, which is now a marine storage shed and dock, to equidistant between the wetlands and the point, so that it's furthest from both. So where it is on the map right now hasn't been changed, but it will be equidistant from both. So it's not as close to Gravel Point and not close to the wetlands, but be halfway between the 2. And I've made notes as we talk. And there is one other building that was not mentioned in the list, and that was a studio, which is not on the point. It's up near where our cottage is, further back away from the proposed. It's proposed, yeah. So that wasn't listed in those accessory buildings, but is included in the proposal. Another important note about the point, we would love input on how to maintain that point and prevent further erosion. You know, we'll be inviting the Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority to give us insight how to make sure that there is no further erosion there. We don't want that. That's why we have no waterfront at that point. And any future members of the cooperative would know the sensitivity of that and be told, you know, wide berth in that area. And another important note to mention is that fish spawning for trout, lake trout, is late September to early December, when there is not a lot of boat traffic anyhow. So that is not expected to have a major impact on that, because the boats won't be in the water at that point anyhow. And we are very open as well to, you know, putting up buoys or signage or whatever. I don't want to damage the visual of that, so I would prefer not to, and just have known the limitations there. But if that was expected or wanted, we're very open to that as well. The commercial rental, she mentioned that the future, who knows what might happen. Well, we don't want that either. We don't want unknown people coming and using cottages on that land. So for us, there will not be Airbnbs ever. That would be part of our bylaws as a cooperative. It would be shared with friends and family, known people only. And yeah, for water servicing and septic, again, it's really important to us to protect the environment as much as possible. So whatever recommendations are made in terms of types of septic systems, or even, you know, composting toilets, or whatever would be recommended to have the least impact possible. Same with communal services or communal water. whatever is recommended to have the least impact, we are absolutely open to that in the site control process. So, Mike?
Hi, my name is Craig Hall. Thank you for hearing us today and thank you for your time, everybody. I'd be happy to take any questions. Mr. Fowler, if you wanted to know anything specific, please ask. I would just comment that we began this process with meetings with the township staff, looking at the North Frontenac bylaws as they were written, which and approved. And we tried our best to follow those guidelines and also applied all of the waterfront residential bylaws to the project, knowing we were in a waterfront zone. So I guess what I'm confused about is that after the fact, after having us go through all this project, it seems like there's cold feet on the idea of a cooperative. But I would say in this case, the site plan control and the careful planning we have done is really a residential cooperative. And I think it can apply. I don't really, I think we've done our best to do everything we can to comply. So it's like a process we began in good faith, and I just would like it to continue in good faith. These are the conditions that you put out, which we have been trying to follow. And I think we sincerely wanted to follow it. I think there's, for me, the ideas of a co-op are partly to do with governance and the future, where, we probably all know someone who has a cottage that the family can't get along and they end up selling it because they can't figure it out. A cooperative structure allows for bylaws that would allow and disallow things for the community's benefit, including how you come in and come out of the co-op. Protecting the best parts of it for the community that uses it. And at the moment that vision is for our family and close friends, but the structure and vision could continue in the future. And because it is a residential waterfront co-op, I don't know why it can't work. And in fact, I don't know why it wouldn't be an example of alternative development that's responsible with people that are really, really invested in the community they're in. I think there's great benefits to having cooperative structure. I thought it was very innovative and creative, in fact. I do think in a waterfront setting, it would require site-specific control, which is what we're proposing, and your staff, who have put a lot of work into this, are proposing. Those are generally my comments. The arbitrary limitation of 3.6 hectares, I'm not sure where that came from, for measuring the impact of it'd have to be 4 cottages, it wouldn't be 5, and it wouldn't be 7. So I just the actual area that you're discussing, it seems to be very firm that it's 3.6 hectares is very questionable to me. I think that could be easily answered by measuring properly. So anyway, any
just
questions?
One last point for that, where that development plan came in, you had to create a map of what we were going to do. That was part of the process for the county, is that we had to propose something. So in some ways it was arbitrary. Why did we choose 7 additional cottages? But we had to come up with a site plan. And that was nicely spaced out along that property, and just allowed for growth in the future. But that's not set in stone in our mind. Like, I mean, we love that, but if there was, a requirement to do less or change position slightly or whatever, we're open to that.
Thank you. Councilor Herbert.
I have a question. How would you resolve the required right-of-way access?
Well, that is a difficult point, and I don't know. I mean, I actually first contacted the fire chief to review the lane because I knew as far as the county was concerned, if there was emergency vehicle access is where the county's power lied, you know, on a private lane, it needs to have emergency vehicle access. So we asked, is this acceptable? Is the lane acceptable for emergency vehicle access? So that's the minimum standard that the county has. So to me, it's like, it's not that unrealistic to actually have a lane that meets emergency vehicle access. Do I have a plan to implement that? I guess I'm hoping in the good faith of neighbors that would like emergency vehicle access. That's really the answer to that. And there may be another solution. I don't really know what it is. I'm hoping for the best, I guess you could say. But as I was educated on the H or the old, I felt like if the zoning was appropriate, which we've done everything possible according to North Frontenac rules and all the environmental conditions, etc. If that was passed, that would be one big hurdle moved, and then we'd have a final hurdle, which is the lane. So, and I don't really know the answer to that.
And just to comment, we do have in place an agreement with the neighbors that it would be maintained to emergency vehicle standards with their approval. So we don't have the right to go and just do it without getting their approval first. So that agreement is in place. And we would just love them to honor it because I think it's very important, not just for the future, but for immediately. We need that now just for safety, for insurance. It affects our neighbor and it affects the other neighbors that are holding it back in a sense that they don't have emergency vehicle standard or insurance requirements met for their own properties either. So I hope in good faith that we can come to some kind of agreement.
Yeah, the truth, we like the character of the lane, but we do recognize it needs to be accessible.
Counselor, any final questions? Oh, yeah. Counselor Fowler?
The plan that you had here is just what you are really set on developing, or are you willing to juggle things around?
We could,
You're open to that.
We're open, yeah.
You know, I think a lot of the people here would be really, you know,
Yeah.
if you're, I'll say it again, but that development from halfway along where it looks like the original road ends, west. Those 5 cottages were out of there and maybe put that somewhere else. I think that would relieve a lot of people.
I think we're definitely willing to make some changes. I don't know if it makes sense to cluster them and have more clearing further on. The reason for it to be spread out is to have, you know, nice spacing, less clearing, but certainly we're open to some changes for sure.
Just to suggest that.
Yeah.
That would.
yeah,
And,
Mhm.
and I saw a couple things on it too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Stuff to take into consideration, because this could get into I've seen some of these, when people trying to develop things, this town is different, and I know of one developer that died.
Mhm.
And then it went on for 20 years or more,
Mhm.
you know, so, and there's so many people against it. You know, it's not overwhelming. So we can find it. Build that belief.
Yeah.
Development process, not easily applied, $500, still the same. And also we are running out of physical time, not today so much, but on the overall process, we have to do something by a certain. Okay, that's all the questions. Anybody final comments?
no, just thank you, staff, particularly for your efforts and counselors for your time. And again, just we're moving forward in good faith.
Very much.
Thank you.
So we're going to go going to take, I know that we think about comments and so on. And we have people who are online who would like to ask questions as well and make comments. We're gonna run this for about an hour, maybe a little more. Your comments, if the county and our staff have taken all your comments pretty much up to date as of about August 1st. So you can make the comments that you want, but you're really taking up time to against comments for new comments that you've seen since a few months. We're gonna ask you to focus on basically on the last iteration. I don't want to hear what you have to say. At the end of the day, we give it half an hour here. We'll turn it over to anybody online. If there's time, I'll bring it back to any key comments that maybe left. But 5 minutes max, and I will hold you to it. You know, and if I think that you're repeating something, I will just that you may want to think about what you're saying. And we want to be as fair as possible. We want to hear from everybody. And then the county will take, and the staff will take them on their comments and whatever they think, like this whole meeting is being recorded. And then they'll see what they can do, if anything can change or whatever, and then we'll come back to council on the 28th where it's sitting, and we have to make it at that time. Okay. So who would like to go first? Andrew? Andrew, please state your full name and.
Thank you, Mayor and councilors. My name's Andrew Waywell. I'm the president of the Palmerston Lake Association. We have over 80 members representing roughly half of all the occupied properties on Palmerston Lake. We also have 45 additional associate members. Our mission is to promote the long-term health and enjoyment of the lake and its watershed. We are not opposed to all development. And this is not in my backyard statement. But we are strongly opposed to this development because of the significant environmental damage it could cause and the precedent it could set. Now, as everybody knows, this has been a very long process. Started, I guess, for the applicants back in 2022. And I commend them for all the hard work they've done since the beginning. But I think, the reason it's taken so long is all the problems that were included in the applicant's original environmental impact statement. For example, that first statement didn't even mention the lake trout spawning bed at the end of Gravel Point, which is the largest spawning bed on the lake. I'd also like to mention that while the county planner's report is certainly thorough and well-researched, we believe there are serious problems with the conclusions that have been drawn. Some of the questionable conclusions that have been reached by relying on the most recent Aegis peer review of the applicant's environmental impact statement. And he just basically dismisses all of the previous concerns they had. And the only difference we can find between the previous report and this one is they removed the boathouse. Everything else seems to be the same as it was. So as a result, we asked Hutchinson Environmental Sciences to review the Aegis peer review of that latest EIS. Hutchinson has serious concerns and conclude that the project should not proceed unless there is unless it is redesigned. Joanne Lane, the senior aquatic scientist with Hutchinson, hopefully will join the meeting by Zoom. I don't see her up there yet, but I know she is planning to. We also have new information across several other areas. We only learned in the county planning report that the two properties in the proposed development in the original application were merged into one property after the original application was submitted. Further, we believe that the Gravel Point property that we at the end of the peninsula, it's only 5 acres. It's not 7.7 acres, or as it is reported in the planning report. So we're not sure where that number comes from, but I think we're we need to be clear, we're talking about 5 acres of gravel point with the marshland area nearby and the lake trout spawning bed, the largest one on the lake, right around the tip of the peninsula. We believe a key flaw in the proposal is the averaging of the number of cottages over the entire 35 acres. This is repeated many times in the planning report. The calculation ignores the fact that 5 of the cottages, as well as the community hall, bunkies, gazebos, the trailer site, are all on the 5 acres of the environmentally sensitive gravel point. This is very high density by anybody's definition. The county planner mentioned earlier that they wanted to compare that density and the appearance to other cottages on the lake. A lot of those, just about all those cottages along the highway, I believe, are in what's actually hamlet zone, and they've been there for years. I think what the comparison should be is to what the zoning is at the current time, and that's limited service waterfront. We don't see any reason to change that zoning along that sensitive waterfront, which is, as you all know, 1 cottage per lot, and the minimum lot size has to be 2 acres. As Deputy Mayor Inglis mentioned, he believes, we believe, the rural cooperative zone was never intended to apply to lakefront property. It also has been mentioned, if this application is approved, what is there to prevent other lakefront property owners that have sufficient acreage from applying for rural cooperative zoning? I did a little checking, and actually there's at least 6 properties on Palmerston Lake alone that have the required 25 acres. So how many rural co-ops could we end up having? I think that's far too much of a precedent. Yes. 1 more minute. I'm almost there. We have also, Mayor and Councilors, the latest results from a petition we circulated to concerned citizens in the area. To date, we have over 550 signatures saying no to this development. This includes a large majority of property owners on Palmerston Lake and lakefront property owners on most of the lakes in North Frontenac Township. The North Frontenac Lake Association Alliance fully supports our opposition to this proposed development. Several individuals from the Lake Association have indicated to me that they would like to speak to specific and separate points with new information related to the planning report, and I hope they will get the opportunity. I just wanted to close by saying if our representative, the scientist from Hutchinson Environmental cannot connect, she must be having problems. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Councilors.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here and voicing your opinion of the association. Anyone else? Councilman, wish to make comments? Yes, sir. Please come up. State your name and you give your 5 minutes.
So, Mayor Litchi, the rest of the council.
No, you have to sit down. You have to tell me who you are first, but tell us who you are.
Hello, Mayor Litchi, the rest of the council and staff. I appreciate this opportunity to speak in this environment. I had prepared quite a bit more than I really need to say here at this time. The simple fact of the matter is that there is zoning in place, as Andrew pointed out, limited service waterfront zoning. The people who live in the waterfront community of Palmerston Lake, each and every one of us, I have a residence there, every one of us follows this zoning to a T. And why do we do that? Well, we do it because we understand the sensitive nature of this environment. We understand the negative impact of disrupting the shoreline. We understand the sensitive nature of stuff like the littoral zone. The littoral zone is that area of the lake just close to the shore where sunlight penetrates fully to the bottom of the lake. And I will plant life to exist. This plant life is an integral part of the lakefront, of the lake trout's life cycle, as well as other natural occurring biological bodies there. So it's beyond me to think why we're even talking about a zoning amendment when there is one that would be applied and would achieve all of the things that the applicants have talked about in terms of ecologically keeping things going, and would also save us a lot of time. Thank you.
You're next.
You're a lot closer than I was expecting. Good morning, barely. My name's Mary Rothfels. I'm a property owner on the North Shore. We're offshore people. We work hard to get back and forth, and we do it because we love the lake. My expertise is in wildlife biology and conservation planning. Over time, oh, sorry, I better read my script or I'll lose my footing here. The last job I had that paid any money was to lead development of a national network of marine protected areas. Over time, I've learned to think strategically about what's worth fighting for when it comes to conservation and how to work collaboratively. We've been hearing a lot about the details of this development proposal, how much housing density can be supported, and the projected impacts of overdeveloping Gravel Point. And you may be losing sight of the larger picture. And that's what I'd like to speak to you about. When we started to design a network of marine protected areas, we were under pressure to meet Canada's new commitment to increase by tenfold the protection of its huge ocean territory, 3 coastlines. Industries like oil and gas were powerful lobbyists, and we faced strong opposition, though the fishing industry was willing to concede that spawning beds and small fish had to be protected in order to harvest large fish. Our first step was to map out all the important habitats and features of all the marine environment. Where did the sea turtles feed? What routes did the whales take? Where were the eelgrass and coral beds, the upwellings, and so on? Then we identified the golden areas, areas that covered off multiple ecological benefits, or areas that were so special, like colonies of endangered seabirds, that they cried out for protection. Finally, we looked at how these important areas were ecologically connected. If we protected one area used by sea turtles but not another, would they still be okay? The interrelatedness of ecologically significant areas is a key factor of conservation planning and something I'm going to come back to in a moment. When we took our draft plan to industry and other stakeholders, we knew we were going to have to make compromises. There was negotiation and a willingness to look for creative solutions. Shipping lanes in the Bay of Fundy were moved to avoid hitting endangered northern right whales, for example, a simple fix that didn't cost anyone anything. Why am I telling you all this? Because on Palmerston Lake, Gravel Point is golden. It's one of the very few golden habitats left on the lake. For a conservation planner, it ticks off multiple boxes. There's a significant wetland, which provides amazing ecological services that keep our water clean. It filters phosphates and other land-based pollutants. It helps reduce the spread of wildfires because it retains moisture in the environment. It reduces erosion and siltation. It captures and stores carbon to mitigate climate change, so on and so forth. Well documented. We need our wetlands.
The wetland is also a significant wildlife area with a low shoreline where animals like loons, ducks, and otters can haul themselves out. These animals aren't designed to be on land. They need low water they can pull themselves out on. There's abundant diversity at all levels of the food chain, and some of the rare species we've talked about can breed there without disturbance. Most importantly, the area has the largest and a provincially significant lake trout spawning bed that is at risk of siltation from boat traffic and eroding shoreline exacerbated by unwarranted deforestation. To return to my comments about the interrelatedness of ecologically significant areas, wetlands work together as a network to help purify the water, provide wildlife habitat, do all the other things I mentioned. The overall benefit exceeds the sum of its parts. How many wetlands does Palmerston need? By my reckoning, 3 major wetlands have already been lost to development, where the marina is, the beach at the trailer park, and partway down the east shore, a landowner decided to fill a wetland to make a nice lawn. There's a lovely wetland at the dam, but there's also a parking lot and a boat launch built in the middle of it. There's a lovely wetland at the mouth of Dead River Creek, and it's getting choked up with invasive species and other weeds. We can already see the cumulative impacts of the loss of these wetlands on water quality, wildlife, and the natural environment of Palmerston. This is not the lake I moved to 33 years ago. Are we going to sacrifice a wetland at Gravel Point as well, or have we gotten smarter over the years? Are there opportunities to compromise, or is this an all or nothing proposition? For the sake of the ecological health of Palmerston Lake as a whole, I urge you to vote no against the current proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is John Livernois. My wife and I are proud residents of this great township. We have a property on Palmerston Lake. My professional background spans more than 40 years of research on environmental policy. Among other things, I've consulted for the Ontario Ministry of Environment, or the National Roundtable on the Environment and the Economy. And I recently completed a 6-year term as a science advisor to the International Joint Commission on Great Lakes Water Quality. So I understand the importance of policy to protect the environment and water quality. I believe that rural planners, urban planners as well, play an incredibly important role in this regard. Land use rules need to be stable and predictable to inspire confidence and trust in the regulatory environment. At the same time, I acknowledge that planning rules need to embody some flexibility to accommodate unforeseeable and unusual geographic or cultural circumstances. However, I believe flexibility is not intended to make it possible to bend the rules to satisfy the wishes of one party. My specific concern with this application and with this planning report, which I've read in detail, is the egregious bending of the well-established and important rules regarding density. And I know, Mayor, that this issue, this point has already been raised a number of times today, but I believe I have several new points to add to it. The official plan says, and I quote, "Limiting the density of buildings and structures in the waterfront area is an important part in protecting the character of the lakes and rivers in North Frontenac. A strong vision through the policies in this plan to limit density is fundamental." End of quote. So to be specific, as we've heard, waterfront area regulations limit density to 1 cottage per 2-acre area. This application proposes to put 1 cottage per 1-acre area on Gravel Point, an area of about 5 acres, as Andrew has indicated, and one that's clearly a waterfront property. So to me, 5 acres means about 2 cottages, not 5. So the proposed development would have more than double the density of cottages that is allowed under planning rules on this point. Keep in mind That would also mean more than twice as many trees will have to be cleared, which will likely lead to twice as much erosion. More than twice as many septic systems will be installed. More than twice as many people will occupy and have an impact on the terrain in the environment than would be allowed under current planning rules. And remember, the rules are there to protect the character of the lake. And in this case, I would add the integrity of this spawning bed. So how does the planning report justify what to me is an obvious violation of planning density rules? My quote from the report. The report says the development is low density in nature because 8 cottages would be spread out over 35 acres, which is approximately 4.4 acres of land per cottage. End of quote. The reality is that 71% of proposed new cottages will be located on about 14% of the property. Now, I would ask, how is that spread out? I think it's the opposite of spread out. It's in fact concentrated, whether you call it clustered or not, it's concentrated density on a relatively small, steeply sloped, environmentally sensitive peninsula. That, as we know, borders the only major lake trout spawning bed in the lake. So to me, saying that the average density is 4.4 acres per cottage, as the report does, is so misrepresentative of the reality that it would be laughable if it weren't for the fact that this project could be approved on the basis of this misrepresentation. Now, I've claimed, and you heard from Mr. Waywell earlier, that the area, the relevant area of the Gravel Point Peninsula itself is 5 acres, or roughly, exactly 2 hectares. You may notice that that's slightly smaller than the area that the planning report claims. My calculations can be verified with satellite data or by using the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry's Land Use Policy Atlas, which has an online area measurement tool, which I've done. Regardless, even if we use the planning report's exaggerated calculation of the area, the report itself concedes that 3 cottages would be the maximum allowed, not 5. I know I'm being harsh and critical of the planning report. I hate doing that because it's clear the planning staff have put an incredible amount of work into this, digested a huge amount of information to produce this report. Nevertheless, the consequences of the conclusion are serious. So I apologize for being critical of planning staff, but frankly, I find it very difficult to believe and accept that a planning report would dismiss the obvious excessive density of the cottages on the point by averaging the number over the entire 35 acres. And please don't tell me that averaging is an industry standard. I don't know if it is or not. It's probably appropriate in many instances, but when the so-called average, 4.4, so grossly represents the reality, 1.0, of what is proposed on this environmentally sensitive peninsula, is clearly not appropriate. I would say if there's ever a piece of land where recognized density restrictions should be applied, it's Gravel Point. Common sense tells us that averaging is wrong in this instance, yet the recommendation to approve this development requires that you accept that averaging argument as being appropriate. I ask the mayor and councillors to reject this application, turn it back for significant revision, and I'm pleased to see that the applicants are open to that. And I see you about to touch that, so I get to say thank you very much. That's what I have to say.
Thank you very much. Liz?
Thanks, Mayor Lichty, and good morning, councillors. My name is Liz Jackson. I'm a permanent resident on the lake. I'm also a member on the board of the Palmerston Lake Association. I'm going to read my comments so I stick to the 5 minutes because it's not usually my style. I want to tell you that Palmerston Lake is precious and rare. I know we've talked a lot about that, but I want to reiterate that only 1% of Ontario's lakes contain lake trout naturally, only 1%. And though that 1% represents 20 to 25% of all the trout lakes in the world. So let me say it again. 1% of all the lake trouts, of all the lakes in Ontario are lake trout lakes, like Palmerston Lake. Even if you're not a fisherman, this is serious. And we know trout are very sensitive. They need clean gravel to spawn. That's why this is such a rare situation. A Ministry of Natural Resources employee told us that they have used divers to verify that only one cottage built above a spawning bed on an Ontario lake was enough to increase sedimentation in the bed. That means the trout will not spawn. So let's talk about this bed on Gravel Point specifically. I have important new information to share. This information just came to light because the Palmerston Lake Association is getting ready to implement Watershed Canada's Love Your Lake program. This is something that we've been planning for a while. And as part of that, last week, biologists from Watersheds Canada came to assess the state of the Gravel Point spawning bed. They used high-definition cameras and video recording equipment to do this. I'll provide copies of the report. But just to summarize the findings, the first thing the biologist conducting the study commented on was the Gravel Point spawning bed is the largest bed she has ever seen. And I will share that she's a seasoned biologist. But she also said it's in bad shape. She noticed significant erosion of the steep gravel slope directly above the spawning bed. And the spawning bed at Gravel Point is, and I quote, compromised by siltation and algae growth. Watersheds Canada is recommending remediation of the bed combined with long-term shoreline stabilization beginning next summer. The many reports you've been given all recognize that this development puts the spawning bed at risk, and they recommend ways to mitigate the damage that will be caused. For example, you just recommended that the removal of the boathouse, and thankfully this has been done. And if the additional buildings, the community buildings, the studio were hooked up to septic systems as has been recommended, it would reduce the impact of phosphorus on the spawning habitat and the lake in general. But he just also says that buoys and speed reduction signage are needed to prevent damage to the bed. And then they point out that the township does not even have the jurisdiction to do this. The idea that buoys and signage will protect the bed is completely impractical. To effectively protect the lake from the cumulative effects of erosion and silt, these buoys and signs would have to be permanent, especially since the applicants say the construction will take many years. Who will install them? Who will monitor and maintain them? This is not a serious solution. The real problem is building so many cottages and docks above the spawning bed. Beginning now, Palmerston Lake Association is partnering with Watersheds Canada to do the responsible thing and get the permits and funding needed to restore the spawning bed next summer. Watersheds Canada's report also recommends planting native vegetation on the slope adjacent to the spawning bed to reduce soil erosion, stabilize the slope, and prevent ongoing siltation. But this needs the owner's permission or a municipal bylaw. I'm almost done. Once the funding and the permits are in place, Watersheds Canada will train volunteers to scrub the rocks using high-pressure gas-powered pumps and hoses to remove this silt and algae. But what we need from you is to not thwart our efforts by turning Gravel Point into a multi-year construction site and a boating playground. Stopgap measures like buoys and signages are not the solution. This spawning bed is a rare, critical resource, and it needs to be properly protected from the cumulative impact of the development. If the bed is not rehabilitated and protected, the trout will not be able to reproduce, and Palmerston Lake won't be a trout lake anymore. It's that simple. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackson. Joan, do you want to comment? Okay, I'm going to allow two more, then we're going to turn it over to the online meeting.
Oh, okay, thanks. Good morning. I'm Jim Getman. My family has owned property on Palmerston Lake since 1936, approaching a century. We are in our fifth generation of being stewards of our over 3,000 feet of lake frontage. I have new information for you this morning. Joan, if she had a chance to comment, would say we have over 550 signatories of our Palmerston Lake petition opposing the proposed development, 550 people. 146 wrote personal comments. How do you describe the indescribable? No one person can possibly distill all of the cherished comments that have been made. These are personal treasures that the Palmerston Lake Association, many of us who are here today and online, has been entrusted, and it is our fiduciary responsibility to deliver them to you. They represent the North Frontenac community, and they are your constituents. Here they are. I'm going to hand them to you, and if time allotted, I was going to ask you to read them in my remaining 5 minutes. I'm sure you will read them. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yep, where you go? Did you go through the whole 550 names? Like, are they all local?
They're all listed.
Or, so they are locals, or do you know people like that? Quite often,
We can give you that complete breakdown if you would like in there.
because quite often we see people who live somewhere else.
This is
who want to
not,
comment.
these are not loaded.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so one more comment being allowed. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor Lichty, Deputy Mayor Inglis, councilors and township staff. My name is Joan Hayes, and I've owned, respected, and cared for my property on Palmerston Lake for 36 years. I'm here representing hundreds of residents and taxpayers of North Frontenac deeply concerned about this proposal. The Hall's own marketing brochure in 2023 states, and I quote, "The main function of the co-op zoning is to allow for more cottages." I end quote. The petition Put Your Foot Down was launched July 14th, 2025 by the PLA and has already gathered over 550 signatures from residents, seasonal cottagers, and taxpayers. Of the 171 properties with dwellings on Palmerston Lake, over 100 property owners have signed showing strong opposition. If you as a council wish to have further details about the breakdown of the people who have signed the petition, I'm going a little off script here. So there is a very extensive spreadsheet that's been done, and it can break it down by what lake, what date, and all of those types of details can be provided and will be when we present the final petition details, which we will do hopefully in advance of your opportunity to vote on this proposal. More than half the signatories are lakefront taxpayers in North Frontenac. Conservatively, lakefront property owners contribute up to 85% of township tax revenue, of which approximately $500,000 comes from Palmerston Lake alone, representing in the neighborhood of 10% of the township's annual budget. So we are kind of a contributor to the township. The petition includes signatories from lakes across all 3 wards. So it's not just a Palmerston thing. It's demonstrating that there are lakes including Kashwakamak, Buckshot, Brule, Mackay, Malcolm, Canonto, just to mention a few. The following is just a few examples of comments from the petition. You have the entire group of comments there up to August 1st, but I'm going to extract a couple of them, and they are condensed. I'm opposed to a co-op being used to skirt local zoning and building rules. If the owners of this property want to build, they have to follow the same rules that every other new cottage owner has to follow when building in our township. Next quote. A change in zoning to rural cooperatives should not happen on a waterfront property for many reasons. Over the years, many have spent countless hours on providing input Read the official plan and waterfront properties. What is being proposed is not responsible development on a waterfront property. Next quote. With a degree in biology and a septic system design install license, I can confidently say that placing 5 septic systems in this sensitive fish spawning area is an environmental risk. And then later in that comment, this individual states, a more sustainable approach would be to limit development to a couple of well-planned cottages, not this overdeveloped proposal. Next comment. I am concerned about the precedent this proposal sets for our township. I'm concerned about folks coming to less densely populated cottage communities than, let's say, Muskoka or Hallerburton, and actively looking for loopholes to the official plan or what they perceive to be an environment of lax enforcement. I'm concerned because once sensitive environments are compromised, they are gone and the township can't get them back. Last comment. This proposal appears to be incongruent with our North Frontenac vision to, quote, preserve our unique and pristine natural environment. Recommend a compromise, modified proposal be developed that respects our current bylaws. To conclude, Gravel Point is a fragile peninsula with steep slopes, wetlands, and the largest trout spawning grounds on Palmerston Lake. Allowing dense development is an unnecessarily high risk to the trout spawning area and critical spawning and nesting habitats. We urge council to uphold existing bylaws, reject rezoning, and preserve this legacy for future generations. This is not about resisting growth. It's about ensuring growth does not come at the cost of our environment, our heritage, and our community's long-term well-being. This power petition is a powerful voice of your constituents against the proposal. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay, so now we're going to get to the next round if we have time, Bruce. So next time now we're going to go to the people online. Berkeley, you're going to be the gatekeeper.
I will. I'll just remind the people online that there is just a bit of a momentary lapse between when I unmute you and when you can begin to speak, so. First person, Barbara Derby.
Hello. My name is Barbara Derby. Full disclosure, I'm actually Jim Getman's daughter who has already spoken. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and my brother. And I am simply going to read the Ontario Provincial Planning's own policy directions and their applicability here. The Ontario Provincial Planning Statement, or the PPS 2024, is consolidated statement of the government's policy on land use planning. It gives provincial policy direction on key land use planning issues that affect communities, such as, bullet point, building more housing where it's needed. Is this relevant here? No. This is a vacation property. There's no need or demand for this in Frontenac County and does not provide for anyone but the applicants. Bullet point, making land available for development, not applicable. This is private land, no public benefit. Bullet, creating opportunities for economic development and job creation, not applicable. Private development, no broader opportunities for economic development. Bullet, planning for the appropriate transportation, water, sewer, and other infrastructure necessary to accommodate the current and future needs, not applicable. This is not public development with public works, for example, water, sewer, power, that could be used by others. Bullet, protecting the environment and important resources, including farmland, water, archaeology, cultural heritage, mineral aggregates, and petroleum. This is in conflict. Even taken all of the paid for non-objective purchase surveys at face value, how does any of this proposal do anything to protect the environment? The possible results are all negative. Bullet, engaging with Indigenous communities to facilitate knowledge sharing, information decision-making, and land use planning to protect Aboriginal and treaty rights. We can't speak to this, as was previously mentioned in this meeting. No one has heard back from any attempts at contact. And finally, protecting people, property, community resources by directing development away from natural or human-made hazards such as flood-prone areas. Clearly, this is not applicable. I would like to understand how this proposal meets the spirit and objectives of the PPS. I believe there is much more in conflict. I'm going to conclude there. Thank you, councilors and mayor, for your strong consideration in objecting to this proposal.
Thank you, Barbara.
I will next unmute Joanne Lee.
Joanne, you have to unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
We can't get her back in the next minute or so. I think we'll find somebody else.
I'm going to unmute Brian Johnson.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks for letting me speak. I had something fully prepared, but seems like everybody else has covered it off. So I just want to basically add, I really took the time to listen to the applicants and understand their desire. And what came out of it was that just like all the rest of us, whether we're cottage owners, and I've been on the lake for 20 years as a seasonal resident, but we use it year round, enjoying the lake and the winter beauty as well. So not just in the summer. And I was attracted to the lake because of how clean and quiet it is with minimal boating traffic. So I understand their desire to want to share their property with family members and friends. I think we all do. And sometimes, you know, we want to build a bunkie or something just so that we can accommodate them. But what I don't understand is wanting to share this. And with the size of this proposal, to me, at an RV parking and so on, it's more than just sharing with family and friends. It's easily done with just adding bunkies or maybe a second cottage, a guest cottage. I don't know. But I'm just concerned because when people come visit me at the cottage, what they enjoy, the first comment is that, oh my God, this is probably the cleanest lake, nicest smelling lake and water that I have ever swam in. And that comment is over and over again. And so my concern is that this is going to disappear. We have one of the cleanest lakes in Ontario, and we don't need large scale development to share it with family and friends. So if that's the intention, then come back with a proposal that maybe it's adding a cottage or something that makes more sense with sharing with their family and friends and not a large scale development, because what we have here, we need to protect so that we're able to share it with family and friends. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brian. Next one, Brooke.
I'm going to unmute Karen Lemieux.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Karen.
Okay, perfect. So my question really relates to the legacy of this project. And I mean, I do understand that at this point in time, this is a family project, but there is nothing to say that circumstances might create a situation where that can't be moving forward. So for example, it has to be sold. Very, very limited ability to sell this to anybody except probably a developer or somebody who would like to turn it into fractional ownership or a rental opportunity. And because of how the cottages are clustered, from my understanding, it would not even be possible to sever those cottages into different lots. So this would have to be sold as is. And I can't imagine that there would be a ton of opportunity for cooperatives to purchase a project like this. And I don't know how the municipality would be able to manage making sure that it isn't turned into fractional ownership or rental properties. Like, I really don't. So, like, I understand the motivation of the people who wish to develop this currently. I don't know how, 25 years from now, and I think everybody is responsible for ensuring that we have a lovely lake, for my children, for my grandchildren moving forward. It is not just about, or should not just be about, this project currently. It needs to be about the project now and what the project could be in 25 years. And that's it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next one, Brooke.
We're going to try Joanne again. I'm just going to try one thing for Joanne. Just hold on one sec, Joanne. I'm going to see if I can get you switched here. Joanne, if you can hear me, I'm just trying to promote you to a panelist so that you can speak. So I just need you to accept it.
Try someone else.
Sorry, I've tried to promote her to a panelist and she's not accepting it.
All right.
So,
We realize you're doing whatever you can, but, you know,
I'll send her another invite and I'll open it up to Mary Nixty. I'm not sure if I've said that right. I apologize.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
oh, please go ahead.
Hey there. Thank you. My name is Mary Dykema-Nikisti, and I am a third-generation family member of the largest privately owned waterfront property on Palmerston Lake, which my grandparents originally purchased as 100 acres in 1937 and hand-built a small cabin on it. Our property is located directly across the north shore of the Gravel Point Peninsula, which we have privately owned, which we have a full view of the Gravel Point North Shore. In 1988, we severed our property to 2.5 acres and 97.5, two separate parcels. And my parents built a second cabin just down the shore on a smaller lot. In 2013, my parents applied for, financed a land survey, and were approved for a lot extension to reconfigure the property into two separate parcels. One 22-acre lot, which included both cottages, and one 78-acre completely wooded lot, which we are proud to say has been virtually undisturbed and in its natural state for well over 85 years. The lot extension did not involve any new structures or change of any kind to the property. To ease the ever-increasing financial cost of maintaining the property for many decades, my parents made the very difficult decision to sell the 78 acres in 2022. We were extremely unfortunate enough to sell within our family, thus allowing our precious property to continue to remain intact as a legacy to our children, just as my grandparents and parents had always intended. At the last minute of the finalization of the sale in the summer of 2022, my parents were informed by the town that they could not have two structures on a lot extension. The lot extension, which was approved, signed off, and completed with the town 9 years earlier in 2013. Since the lot extension was now viewed as invalid, we were forced to separate the cottages back on to the original two separate parcels, 2.5 acres and 97.5 acres. Thankfully, we were still able to keep both properties within the family, but at an extremely emotional and financial cost in all aspects to our family members involved. I'm only explaining our particular situation to make this point in relation to the Gravel Point Co-op development. How is it that we wish to simply make a quiet land transfer and sale of property within our own family, complied with all the rules and regulations that were approved by the town, and then later learned we were not allowed to have two structures? Mind you, that's two long existing, already established structures on a lot extension. But the Gravel Point project proposal consisting of 8 new cottages, a workshop, studio, 2 additional sleeping cabins, a communal building, storage buildings, 3 gazebos, trailer site, is given any consideration. You know, I understand that this, as time passes and families expand, it's likely that a new cottage or 2 will be added to properties. That's natural, but that's something that I would think happens gradually over time. We now have a core family of 4 generations totaling 14 people. We share 2 modest cabins, one built in 1937 and the other in 1988. I'm wondering why there are essentially 13 plus new buildings with this co-op. And how big of a family and friends is this co-op going to accommodate? My biggest concern is the precedent this will set. And no, this doesn't even account for the environmental and physical damage that will result from the project development. I personally have been fortunate enough to actually see the magic of the renowned Palmerston Lake indigenous trout literally spawning in the clear water shallows at the tip of Gravel Point in the fall months. There's no doubt that those spawning beds would be disturbed or even disappear with the magnitude of the construction and destruction of the proposed co-op colony on Gravel Point, never to return again. There is a palpable, inexplicable, magical essence that Palmerston Lake invokes. We, as the temporary caretakers of the lake, have a responsibility and owe it to protect and preserve it the best way we can for generations to come, just as the mission statement states that Councillor Hermer mentioned earlier. But more importantly, we need to protect the precious nature of Palmerston Lake. With that said, I urge council to vote against the proposal set forth for the Gravel Point Rural Co-op. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mary.
I'm going to open the floor up to Janice Arthur.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. This has been really fascinating. There's been lots of new information from my point of view. But what I really don't understand is how this proposal could have gone on for close on 4 years now and be entertained as a rural cooperative. It is not, strictly speaking, rural. If township wants to entertain the idea of a new zoning, you could have a lakefront cooperative with entirely different requirements. And they would be well laid out, and you would know whether this was adhering to those requirements or not. That is the only point I want to make different from what I've heard before, but I entirely support what people have said.
Thank you for your input, Janice.
I'm going to try and get Joanne again. Joanne, if you can see an option to unmute yourself.
Brooke, I think we're kind of at the end of that. We tried several times now. It's just not working. Do you have anyone else in line?
We do actually. We have two more. I'm going to open the floor up to Kevin Duguay.
Your worship, members of council, I'd like to ask if you are able to hear me.
Yes, we can, Kevin.
Thank you, your worship. I am the planning consultant for Peter and David Roberts. I have been affiliated with the proposed cooperative development starting in early 2023. My staff have visited the property. My staff have conducted drone imagery of the property in the area. I have, as a professional planner, read and considered every technical report produced to date, including first, second, and most recently, third submissions. Your worship, the directive of this meeting is to consider new information, and I would like accordingly to speak thus to the staff report. By background, I was a City of Peterborough's planner. I've had my own private planning practice for 20 years, so I'm very conversant with writing a range of planning documents. The The report as written recommends, as part of the implementing bylaw for zoning purposes, a holding provision. The holding provision indicates that it would be removed upon the agreement between the development proponents and my clients insofar as upgrades and improvements to a private laneway. Your worship, members of council, I have never, ever in my professional planning practice, which started in 1989, witnessed or seen such a recommendation. The Planning Act simply does not permit, through zoning and or site plan provisions, the opportunity for off-site or off-property improvement, saving and except if it was a municipal road allowance, which in this case, La Folia Lane is not. I have considered the fire department, emergency or paramedics, and public works response, and they have indicated very clearly that the laneway needs to be improved. But the laneway that needs to be improved is not owned by the Halls, it's owned by, if you will, my clients. The Halls have indicated in their deputation that they have an agreement with my clients insofar as the use of the laneway and including necessary upgrades. Following my delegation will be Jenna Corey Hanna, who is the lawyer retained by my clients, who will speak to the intricacies of and details of such matters. With respect to the environment, your worship, we have heard that there remains very significant and unanswered matters that still require attention. My clients have hired 2 environmental consultants to date. They have completed peer reviews and conducted site inspection of the my clients' lands, and they have found inadequacies and deficiencies associated with the environmental reports completed to date. There has also been some reference, your worship, members of council, in the staff report indicating or trying to compare this development with the plan of subdivision. Plainly put, a plan of subdivision could never happen on this property. It's not a settlement area. This would not be an appropriate location for same. Now, I have that opportunity, like many of the speakers, and I'd like to thank all the delegations that have addressed council to date. Their commentary was quite valuable. I would like to speak, though, to the Hall's presentation specifically. They've indicated, when queried by staff, well, how would you go about securing?
Kevin?
Yes, sir.
Kevin, you only have a total of 5 minutes here, right?
I'm aware of that, and how much time have I remaining?
Well, you're about halfway through.
I will be done in about 1 minute.
Thank you.
And I respected the 5-minute delegation. I'm also a city councilor in Peterborough, so a rule we steadfastly maintain. So the Halls indicated, your worship, in their delegation that they hope, and it's their intention, to resolve or hoping for the best to resolve the laneway issue. And your worship and members of council, that is not a satisfactory solution. It tells me as a professional planner that there is no solution in place and that their development as proposed, as recently modified, as expressed through your planning report, it relies solely upon the use of a private laneway, which they do not own, and which said laneway appears to require considerable improvements. And that would be to the detriment of the owner of the laneway and the environmental context of same. In conclusion, your worship, members of council, as a professional planner, I do not concur with the staff recommendations. I find the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications to be not representative of good planning, inappropriate for its setting and its environmental context in Palmerston Lake. Your worship, members of council, these are my comments. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. So Brooke, how many more do we have left on the line?
So I have Jenna Corey Hanna, and then we're gonna try and get Joanne one more time.
Okay, well, we'll do Janet, we'll follow that, and then that's it for online.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Just like to double check. Just before I get into my points for today, I did write a short letter providing an overview in case I run out of time and can't touch on everything that I sent in yesterday. And I just wanted to confirm that council has received a copy of that letter.
I don't think so.
Okay, it was emailed to Miss Dreschler, and she did acknowledge receipt and said that it was going to be circulated. So perhaps I'll just follow up on that after this, just to ensure that you have a copy of the letter.
Ms. Drexler is your IT host here today, and she will ensure that we get it.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm here today. I'm an associate lawyer at Kinchetti Litigation who've been, and we've been retained by Peter and David Roberts, specifically in relation to some concerns and questions about La Folia Lane. As you've already heard today, La Folia Lane is a private laneway. It's a laneway that runs through both of my clients' properties. And what I really wanted to specifically address here for you today is the position that I understand the township is taking, that the easement on title doesn't indicate any limitations on the use for additional development. And so it's basically it's okay pending the what has been deemed to be a civil dispute between the applicants and my clients. But I think what this fails to consider are common law principles that apply to easements. And I only raise this because, as all of you would be well aware, municipalities are creatures of statute, and you've delegated powers given to you by way of the Municipal Act. And in exercising that delegated authority, municipalities are supposed to be making decisions or recommendations that fall within kind of a broader array of laws and common law principles. So an easement like La Folia Lane is considered to be a burden on servient lands, and servient lands would be the lands, for example, that my clients own. And that burden cannot be increased unilaterally by the dominant owner, and the dominant owners in this case would be the cooperative, because they're the ones that's the owner that benefits from La Folia Lane. And so traditionally there's two ways to increase a burden. So one is using the easement to benefit lands not contemplated in the grant, and the second is intensifying the use beyond the use contemplated in the easement. And so for an example of lands not contemplated in the grant, I have a case, and I've given the reference for it in the letter. It's Harris v. Flower. And basically a dominant owner owned parcel 1, which had the benefit of a right-of-way, and parcel 2, which did not. And the dominant owner in that case built a factory across both parcels, but access to parcel 2 was only over parcel 1 in the right-of-way. And the court actually held that this was an overburdening because parcel 2 otherwise should not have had access. And I think this principle is important because we have two properties that are merged here, and it's unclear to me whether one of the properties actually benefits from La Folia Lane and that easement that exists, and if so, that's an overburdening at law. But also the example of consents or subdivision in the staff report to show what might be permitted as a comparison isn't accurate because the easement would never extend to those additional parcels, and so that's not something that council or that the municipality would ever be recommending or approving. And then for an example of use intensification, I've cited the case TDL Group v. Harvey, where the courts held that a change in use from a single family residence to an apartment building was an overburdening of the right-of-way. And so the increased use must be of a nature different from or beyond what the parties reasonably intended when the easement was granted. And in this case, when the easement was granted, what was located at the applicant's property is a single cottage and not this. I understand that there's going to be restrictions on commercial use, but it is at the end of the day still a resort style development that's being contemplated in this planning application. And I want to impress upon you today that laws like this play a role in why municipalities have restricted development where private laneways are involved, because the municipality shouldn't be approving or directing development to occur where it runs afoul of other legal principles, or the end result is essentially potentially putting neighbors into conflict with one another by a way of approving something like this application that's before you today. And I think at the end of the day, La Folia Lane presents a really significant barrier, and not one that I think is going to be overcome at the end of the day. And I don't think it's been given appropriate regard. And I don't think that the holding symbol fixes that or provides a path forward. And I think it's, to be frank, I think it's a little silly to approve a planning application that realistically may never happen because of what a burden or what a barrier La Folia Lane presents. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is...
Jenna, you have 1 minute left.
I have one last point to make, and I'll be quick. Is just, and I've already attached it before in a previous letter, but we actually have an Ontario Municipal Board decision involving the same laneway, in which the Ontario Municipal Board said that you can't force improvements on neighbors. And so the development couldn't be approved in that case. And that was back in 1993 and was a much smaller development than what is proposed here today. And I will leave it at that. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Okay, Brooke, make that one last attempt.
There is one other member of the public raised that hand.
Okay, we'll do that. One last attempt. That's it for online.
Okay, so Kevin, and then Joanne.
Hello, Honorable Council. I trust you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
I'd like to thank you very much for hosting the opportunity to speak to you today. I have a history as a resident in the township going back 35 years, and while I'm not currently a resident, I have a long time history of use in the township and have great appreciation for its beauty, for its pristine nature. I particularly appreciate how it is not like Muskoka, which is precisely why I enjoy it. I know this meeting is to share new information, and so as one who would like to speak in favor of the applicants, I trust that might be novel enough to qualify as new information. I would simply like to say that in what I have seen of the Hall's dedication to this application through the township over the last number of years, what I would want to speak to today is my hope that both the township and those who have spoken against the application would give acknowledgement to the tremendous time, the financial cost that the Halls have incurred as they have in good faith met every single requirement that has been requested of them from the township. It's disappointing to come to this place today to find that as they have endeavored to work with the guidelines they have been given, to now find that there is such opposition to their application. I'm not going to speak to legalities of easements or right-of-ways or many of the other things that have been raised today, but it would be my hope, and I think in this I would be speaking to the Honorable Council, the Township, but also to the Palmerston Lake Association and those who are residents or seasonal residents of the lake. I could not impress upon you enough how working in cooperation with the Halls and not in opposition would actually be in your best interest. When you look at what the Palmerston community and what the township of North Frontenac seeks to be in everything that's been discussed today, you would not find people of greater benefit and positive involvement in your community than the Halls. I have heard how there has been concern about things that have been offered in good faith. I've heard some criticism about what the Halls hope to do. Certainly some of those things depend on cooperation from other neighbors and adjacent parties. But it would be in the interest of the community to see how the property on Palmerston Lake, and especially the sensitivity of the property that the Halls own, you could not ask for people better positioned and more inclined to work cooperatively with the people around them for the benefit of the community. So I guess I'm speaking today to encourage all parties to look at how working collaboratively is really in the best interest of all. That I know that there is great altruistic motives on the part of those who have spoken today, but I hope that they would also be aware enough to look past self-interest and to see how the Palmerston Lake community has enough space for others to also enjoy. Anyway, I felt I would be remiss if I did not speak in support of the halls today, and hope that my words in the face of some of the other words today could still have some influence on considerations going forward. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you. Okay, one last try.
Okay, Joanne, we're going to try again. Joanne, you may need to use that link that was sent to your email to try and connect to the meeting.
Amen, period. Running a bit late, period. Might be a little closer to 1:15, but I will be there.
Hey, Brooke, I think we're done. Okay, thanks to everybody online who's made comments. I'm going to open it up for a maximum of 2 more comments, and Bruce Moore is 1. And one of you can only speak once, Andrew, sorry. And I'll let the calls have the final 2 or 3 minutes at the end.
My name is Bruce Moore. I'm the president of the North Frontenac Lake Association Alliance. So the comments that I make are on behalf of the 20 lake associations that are our members and that have endorsed us speaking on this topic. We are not an alliance that wants to interfere in the affairs of individual lake associations. So it has been good to hear all the comments that people have brought forward as owners of property on Palmerston Lake. The reason our alliance is speaking is that we are concerned with what has been mentioned earlier in the meeting of the precedent-setting nature if this property under the official plan becomes rezoned and takes on a rural cooperative zoning provision. I remind you that the rural cooperative provision exists in one place and one place only in all of Ontario, and that is here in North Frontenac. It was made some 50 years ago on an exceptional basis. The fact that it is now being used indicates that these things can be used as precedent setting, and therefore, if this property finds a way to accommodate the many requests that are being made, we encourage that you do not allow to continue to use this as a rural cooperative and perpetuate the use that this could continue to be precedent setting. Yeah. That is our main concern because we're aware, as you are aware, of the extensive process, extremely extensive process that the township went through to finally approve the current official plan. And as John Ingalls has said, this application would require altering the official plan in order to adjust this category, which is different than a bylaw amendment. And therefore, we feel very strongly that an application of this nature should not be the basis to change what was previously established through thorough community participation. And this is important as it is a rather narrow form of consultation. The other comment that I would make that has not come up that is separate from these views of our alliance is that we as an alliance are working on the issue of carrying capacity of lakes in conjunction with the Mississippi Valley and other bodies, given that the current regulations about classifying whether a lake has the capacity for further development is something that is seen to be increasingly out of date, But this is out of date when it comes to Palmerston, in that the report does not indicate how much development has occurred on Palmerston since the time that the last readings of
Like you're gonna give me a
phosphorus were
chance.
taken. And therefore, one cannot conclude
She's
as
gonna-
many of the arguments that there's necessarily
I don't
a
get
full
work done.
level of capacity for further development. That could be looked at more.
Just,
Well.
Well, that and just see
This?
with the arrow.
Okay, so anyone
See what
wants to
comes
make one final comment? Yes, sir. Well,
Check.
I'll finish this and we'll let her go after this gentleman. And then that's it. And then the halls can have a couple minutes.
Hi, my name is Jerry Strobach.
That's not.
I haven't been on a lake as long as many others
Oh,
here, but I have learned to
Let me
love
know,
it.
I would just say.
I want to focus a little bit on the question of septic. It sounds like it's not clear to me, and this is a question for the planners. Have the additional usage associated with the bunkies been accounted for the septic capacity calculations?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, would you like us to answer questions directly from the public?
Yes.
We haven't done it before though, so that's fine. So again, and Jenny, correct me if I'm wrong. Under the Ontario Building Code, which is what the township administers for septic systems, they do not include the bunkies and the sleep cabins. In our correspondence with MECP, they would like to see them included, but until the threshold is reached, the MECP has no jurisdiction until the 10,000 liters.
So on this point, we've heard that this used to be a gravel pit. And that means it's disturbed soil. And my understanding with septic development should be done on natural undisturbed soil. Has that been considered at all?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, specifics with regards to septic design and location will be addressed through the building department. I don't have the technical expertise to answer that question. But the review would be done the same way it would be done for any other septic system installation proposal.
However, there's a risk, you acknowledge that there's a risk that even though we approve this, septic may not be a reasonable possibility, in this environment. And particularly, I'm concerned about the fact that the threshold is very close to the, 10,000 liters per acre required for MECP approval. And given the sensitive nature of this development, that, that threshold is based on typical. This is not typical. So once again, septic is a concern. Second point I wanted to, this is once again a question. They want to do what, the applicants want to take water from the lake and a separate well for each accommodate, or a separate line for each accommodation. Has it been addressed by this thing, a buried line or a surface line? If it's a buried line, I want to say that that is a huge disturbance of the, of the waterfront.
Yeah, through you, Chair. As Sonia noted earlier, the specifics on exactly the number of water servicing lines has not been determined. Intent is to draw from the lake, but the specifics on the individual design of water and septic haven't been settled on, and will be done through building permit under the guidance of the Ontario Building Code requirements.
So I want to state then too, that since this hasn't been decided, this is also a significant risk to the, to this development and, sustainability for the lake. Those are the points I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Brooke, last comment.
Joanne, you are unmuted. I'd like to go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, what a battle. Thank you for your patience, everybody. As you all know, my name is Joanne Lane. I'm a senior scientist with Hutchison Environmental Sciences. Andrew Waywell referred to me earlier in the presentations.
I was asked by the Palmerston Lake Association to review the March 2024 version of the EIS produced by GemTech, for which I provided comments. Subsequently, I was asked to review the revised EIS that was submitted in July 2025. I've had similar concerns to Aegis, and the revised version of the EIS by GemTech did address some of these concerns, but several important issues are still outstanding. And these have been mentioned by others, but I'm going to come at it from a slightly different angle. Primarily, cumulative effects, significant wildlife habitat, and therefore the need to redesign the proposed development. I'm going to start with cumulative impacts. They've not been addressed satisfactorily. Human activity, boat traffic, nutrient inputs, and habitat removal are all highly likely to impact not only the lake trout spawning beds, but other fish habitat and terrestrial wildlife and habitat. These need to be addressed. The letter of advice received from DFO provides mitigation measures to address construction impacts only. It doesn't address impacts due to operation of boats throughout the summer and fall. While lake trout are known to spawn in fall and winter, spawning activity can begin as early as August, and boat traffic around the spawning grounds is likely to impact this activity over time through noise, sedimentation, and wave action because the spawning beds are actually quite shallow. The revised EIS recommends signage and buoys, which could help, but the planning report states that this type of mitigation is outside the scope of the applications and the applicant's lands, therefore not implementable. MECP also provides mitigation measures, and these are to avoid endangered bats and Blanding's turtle. First of all, no other species are mentioned in their communication, such as eastern whippoorwill. And the measures again address only construction impacts with no mention of impacts resulting from the development over time. Accumulation of phosphorus is also likely to show up over time. I know that the drainage goes toward the center of the property, but again, over time, this will end up in the lake. Sediment is known to build up. And mentioned earlier, the recent survey conducted by Watersheds Canada shows that there's already impact to the spawning beds. The sedimentation and the algae that's currently occurring there will only be exacerbated by increased human and boat activity. Significant wildlife habitat, or SWH, is addressed in a perfunctory manner in the EIS. For example, SWH for woodland breeding amphibians is incorrectly defined, such that the conclusion that it is not present on the property is incorrect. It, in fact, is present. Similarly, otter denning. The site was declared relocated and confirmed to be abandoned. Yet we know that otters are known to reuse dens or to use several dens, so it's possible the otter will return. The Merlin nesting survey is a moment in time. Just because Merlin wasn't observed on that day doesn't mean it isn't there. There was no information provided about the protocol used, such as the length of broadcast calls, how long was the listening period, and also it was conducted at the wrong time of year. There was no consideration given to a species of special concern, the eastern wood pewee, which is a woodland bird species. Which brings me to redesign of the proposed development.
Joanne?
There was
Joanne?
Yeah.
You have
Yeah.
about 2 minutes left and I'll have to just ask you to stop.
Yeah, no, I'm nearly done. Thank you. There was an area given for the development footprint with respect to the cottage areas, but the footprint of the buildings does not consider the trails and the disturbance across the property of people moving to and fro throughout the development. In addition, it's well known that development spread out over an area has greater environmental impact than a more compact development. The former results in runoff and erosion over a greater area and results in more destruction of wildlife habitat. The latter could include green infrastructure, and it concentrates human activity within a smaller area. In conclusion, based on the ongoing issues, we recommend redesign of this development with a view to reducing a number of buildings, clustering them away from Gravel Point in the less sensitive area of the property. A configuration of this, such as this, would achieve a smaller overall footprint, would remove less habitat, and overall would reduce the ecological impact of this development. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you one and all for your comments. I'd like to offer the halls an opportunity, just a couple minutes if you'd like to make a final statement.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who brought comments and concerns. We appreciate that. So just a few follow-ups from what people said. The site-specific zoning that we have ended up on is very, very similar to what is your waterfront zoning. So we are ultimately meeting all of those requirements. I've noted that there are some about density, a cottage per every 2 acres or something. We're open to suggestions of repositioning things in order to more closely meet that type of requirement. So please feel free to do that or make recommendations. Regarding the wetlands, we have entirely avoided that area. We will not be developing anything in the area of the wetlands. So that should not be an issue. Our cottage sites are ultimately much smaller than what a normal cottage site would have because of the use of the community buildings and the shared bunkies and those types of things. So when you imagine a cottage site, you're really looking at a cottage and maybe a small shed. It's not going to be all of the accessory buildings on each cottage site, nor its own waterfront and clearing in order to meet that. The actual nature of our docks, very specifically, there is one that will be your typical waterfront area that has some clearing and some, boat traffic and, fun games with tubing and that sort of thing, but only one. There's another small single swim dock only, might see a canoe there or something, but not any motor traffic. And the one on the bay side is only for parking boats when people are not at the cottage. So there will be no active waterfront activity from that area and wide berth around the gravel point in order to get your boats parked there. I love the idea that the Watershed Canada is looking at this. I would love for their input on how to prevent further erosion and will gladly work with them. As well as any signage that's required, we would gladly at our own expense implement anything that is needed for that, because that area is just as important to us as it is to everybody else. And for that reason, again, there is no waterfront ultimate presence there. There's no dock, there's no steps leading down to the water. The only thing there currently proposed is a couple of cottages further set back with construction mitigation methods in place. We did have septic spaces completely tested and for their suitability, and they were approved. Again, we would meet any requirements for the most possible environmentally friendly, least impact recommendations, and would be very happy to implement that. Same thing with the water drawing from the lake. If that requires being on land and not under, perfect. We'll do whatever is required to do that in the least impactful method possible. I think that's it, except for I'll let Craig speak to the selling method and the concern about what the future holds for and how that could happen.
Yeah, just a couple of things on my mind. One of them is that the site plan that we prepared originally, and it has been modified some, it was to fit the bylaws that were provided. So we were trying to fit into the rules we were given. Now, if the parameters appear not to be correct, that would be a revision of the rules, and we'd be happy to look at that. That's kind of what I'm saying. It's like we were just doing what we were asked to do, and if there's a common sense revision on that, or I like the idea of a lakefront cooperative bylaw zoning. I thought that was a good idea. The other point Is, oh yeah, so the structure of the co-op, the co-op would have its own bylaws, and therefore the members would be able to participate in the co-op using those bylaws, and including in that would be how would you sell your position or your membership in the co-op, and how would you find a new member? And that's how the co-op would continue in its structure. And because you would have different members, conceivably it would continue on versus selling the whole thing, because the different interests would want to stay. So we only sell slowly over time, or like change membership over time. I hope that makes some sense, but there would be a set of bylaws that we would want to live by as well in the co-op.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, council, you want to read the resolution?
Moved by Councillor Fowler, seconded by Councillor Hermer. Be it resolved that council receives for information the planning report prepared by Jenny Capusta, community planner, of the County of Frontenac regarding the official plan application file OP 0222 and zoning bylaw amendment file Z0822 for Palmerston Cottage Cooperative, and thanks for Silver Township.
Comments? In favor? Carried. Regulatory bylaw.
Moved by Councillor Good, seconded by Deputy Mayor Ingles. Be it resolved that bylaw 2025-38 being a bylaw to confirm all actions and proceedings of council for a special meeting held August 12, 2025 be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed.
In favor? Carried. Adjournment.
Moved by Councillor Good, seconded by Deputy Mayor Ingles. Be it resolved that council adjourns the meeting at 12:58 p.m. until August 28, 2025 for the call of the chair.
Comments? In favor? Carried. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you to everybody for your comments, for your interest, for being here. We really appreciate it.